College students across the land spend free time getting girls. They go to parties, make some friends, not watch reruns of Boy Meets World. There's a man who stands alone, a man with time to spare. DS in hand, he stays at home and never cuts his hair. Jack alone needs to get I'll be okay. Who needs puberty anyway? Jack alone, ooh, he's so alone. Why does he even have a phone? Jack alone needs to get a job. Stop living like such a slum. Do you ever go outside? Jack alone needs to get a life. Needs to get a life. Get a life. Ugh. Smashtalk. That's right, it's time to do the Pokemon series. Now, I'm a huge fan of the series, even though the plots in the game tend to be more repetitive than U2 and only slightly more original than a graduation speech. But I still find the gameplay fun and addicting, and it's got an interesting little world and a few small quirky things that you can always laugh at, like the things that they'll say to you before you fight them and such. It's a good series, but that's not important. What is important is which Pokemon characters are a good idea for the next Smash game. And after spending a long time looking through all the Pokemon and weighing their good and bad points and looking at the polls to see which are the most popular, I think I've got a good idea. As I'm sure I've heard most of you hear Isaac or Pizza Dude Man Guy say on his videos, popularity is the most important thing when you're selecting Pokemon, but it's not the only thing. So I'm going to cover a few different areas. Popularity is still really important, but there's also things like feasibility. Can a Pokemon actually be in the game? For example, you're not going to have a Dunsparce in the game. Not that anybody wants a Dunsparce, but it's not feasible. Dunsparce doesn't have limbs. It's got the tail. It's how do you make it move in a fashion that would suit the style of Smash Brothers? By the way, if you're wondering what's on my Pokewalker, it's a Magikarp. I keep him on here for two reasons, actually. First off, being that it's a pain to try and train him by actually fighting him because you can't really do anything. Second of all, it doesn't matter what Pokemon you have in here, they all fight the same. So I just find it really, really funny to take down Kangaskhan and stuff with a fish that can basically do nothing but go into epileptic shock. Now, IGN recently did a poll where they looked for the top 100 Pokemon after Black and White came out, and this is in terms of popularity, not in terms of how strong they are. I found one that listed how strong they were, and it was mostly legendaries, which I'll get to later. But I looked through that and saw what they've got up there, what generations are represented, and then I looked through and saw what the Pokemon that we have already had in Smash represent and such, and what holes need to be filled in and everything. And this is basically what I've found. First-gen Pokemon are still more popular than basically anything. There were probably around a third of the Pokemon on there were first-gen out of the 5 games. That's pretty hefty. Something I thought was really interesting, Pikachu is only number 48 on the list, so he's really not even one of the most popular Pokemon anymore. But he is the icon of the series, so he has to stay. It's just, you have to have him. Charizard is not only is Charizard the most popular. Please don't take him out. Every single evolution of the first-gen starters was on the top 100. Charmander, Charmeleon, Charizard, Bulbasaur, Squirtle. All of them were on there. So I really think removing the Pokemon Trainer is a bad idea because you're effectively cutting out 9 popular Pokemon. Second gen had a few. Third gen had a few, but nothing high up on the list. It's actually really interesting is once I got to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th gens, it was hard to find anything that wasn't a legendary. Well, for the first gen, you've got Pikachu, Scyther, Arcanine, Mewtwo. Mewtwo was second most popular. Dragonite, Ninetales, Alakazam, Gengar, Nidoking. Second gen, you got Caesar, Typhlosion, Tyranitar, Umbreon, Houndoom. EV evolutions. A lot of the EV evolutions were up there. So it's an interesting idea. If you want to do something with an EV, maybe that evolves or something. Although I don't know how you would do that. It'd be a new mechanic. But see if you can come up with a way for it to work, I guess, if you want to have an EV in there that evolves. But Flareon, Vaporeon, Jolteon. Jolteon was the highest. Umbreon and Glaceon, that's 5 out of the 7, were all on the top 100. Third gen, you have Salamence, Blaziken, Absol, Swampert, Flygon, and Aggron. Fourth gen, the only ones that weren't legendaries were Garchomp and Lucario. And then Darkrai was on there, and I can see him working, so I put him anyways, just because there's so few in the 4th gen that were feasible and popular. 5th gen, Hydreigon, which could be feasible. It'd have to be done very well. But once again, it's just there were so few. The only other two were Zoroark and Samurott that weren't legendary. And the reason that I don't think we should have legendaries is mostly because of the scale of the legendaries. With Mewtwo, it wasn't a huge deal because Mewtwo was around the same size as other Pokemon. It wasn't a big deal. Most of the legendaries after that are either birds, so they can't really walk on ground or anything, so they're not feasible. Or they're just way too large. Look at Palkia, Dialga, Groudon. They're huge, and scaling them down wouldn't work right because, I mean, these Pokemon, how their size and everything in relation to each other, the Pokemon at least have to be in proportion. It's just the way it seems. It takes away a lot of who the Pokemon is if you resize it, I think. Whereas with Olimar, it wasn't a huge deal because in his world, yeah, he's normal sized. It's not that big of a deal. That, and I feel like they should be reserved for Pokeball Pokemon, for bosses, for stage Pokemon, because they have insane powers that are kind of cheap if you have them in a character, but add a lot to gameplay. Like Rayquaza should be a boss. It's a good idea for a boss. A lot of the legendaries could be bosses. Mewtwo was the most popular legendary by quite a bit. Maybe he should come back. He did represent a fairly unique thing. Anyways, getting back into the Pokemon. In the game, they were really unique. Each Pokemon, each of them was a different element. Each of them had a unique style. And I feel like that's also something you should take into consideration when you're planning your next Pokemon. Pikachu is electric. He's the only electric in the game, except for Pichu, who was unnecessary, which is why Pichu was taken out. Pichu didn't really add anything to the field. It added the baby Pokemon thing, but that's not a huge part of the series, really. Jigglypuff, normal, and is an iconic character, even though she wasn't in the top 100. Mewtwo, psychic, represents the legendaries without being too out there. Lucario, I didn't like Lucario. Not gonna lie, not that he wasn't a good character, but I just kept, whenever I played as him, I was like, this isn't Lucario. Lucario's a fighting steel type. Yeah, he has an aura, but he's not psychic, I want him to be redone to actually be a fighting steel type. Because right now, he's kind of occupying what Mewtwo used to do. So if you want to have Mewtwo come back, you should probably change Lucario or get rid of Lucario, because he's doing a lot of the things that Mewtwo did. He's basically a replacement for Mewtwo. And it doesn't work for me, but that's just my own personal whining. Charizard, Ivysaur, and Squirtle represent 9 of the most popular Pokemon of all time, out of all 5 gens. You gotta keep them. Charizard, fire and flying. And it was feasible. It's a feasible flying type. It's hard to work Zapdos in there because how are they going to trip? How are they going to, not just fly above everybody and zap them? Ivysaur, grass. And what's interesting is Ivysaur is the only quadruped, except for Pikachu, debatably, although Pikachu can stand on 2 feet, and he did. He can use his hands like hands. Ivysaur is the only biped, and it only worked. Ivysaur worked because he had vines, which replaced the appendages that he didn't have, so he could still do things that other quadruped Pokemon can't. Like, even though I love Arcanine, and Arcanine's really popular, Growlithe is my favorite Pokemon, by the way, but Arcanine isn't entirely feasible because his body isn't built in a way that's very flexible. You would have to break the Pokemon's physics for it to fit as a Smash character. Um, Squirtle, water. And he represents, and the three of them represent the different evolutionary stages. There we go. Now, so, looking at this, they're all first gen, except for Lucario. So now the big debate here is, do you try to fit every generation, or do you just go for popularity, or do you just go for variety and types? Because if you're going for every generation, oh boy, 5th gen you don't have a lot to work with. I'm not going to lie. I mean, the most likely, honestly, if you keep Lucario, the most likely, I think, is Samurott. The problem is he also represents water, which Squirtle's got covered. Zoroark, very, very similar to Lucario. If you want to replace him, sure. 4th gen, Garchomp is really popular. He's unique. He hasn't been done yet, and he would work, I think. It'd be a little bit scary having a Garchomp in there. If you want to go for just outright most popular, bring Mewtwo back. Mewtwo's got the second highest popularity. Nidoking could be a good choice. If you're going for most popular, he was pretty popular. Mewtwo, a lot of people talk about the precedent of, bringing back characters that were cut. I don't think it's completely unfeasible. Popularity is still the most important thing in Pokemon. I can understand the hesitation. So it's up to you. I'm so glad I get to opt out of these tough decisions. With the Eevee evolutions, the hard thing is, like I said, they're quadrupeds. If you can think of a way for it to work, go for it. Other good choices. We don't have a rock type. You could go for Aggron. He'd be really, really heavy. We don't have an incredibly heavy Pokemon yet. The closest thing we have is Charizard, and he flies. Aggron doesn't have that. Though I'm wondering how you would work on recovery with Aggron, but hey, it's Pokemon. Squirtle can create water out of nowhere to ride it back up, so you can do something with the rock and ground and such. Well, I guess you can't really do much with ground when he's in the air. But it's pretty good, I think. Aggron would represent things that haven't been represented yet. And he's a biped. Yay, bipeds. Scyther would be a good choice, actually. Scyther and Caesar are both really popular. But also take into account that you need Pokeball Pokemon. And maybe a lot of the 5th gen can be that, because it can't be much else. The 5th gen doesn't have a lot of viable popular options. Oh, Victini. There was a person who had Victini in his roster. I don't know if it was Dr. Slavic or if it was someone else, but somebody had Victini. Looking it up, that could work. Psychic and Fire is a unique type. Although Fire is represented and Psychic's kind of represented, Victini could be interesting. It's just it wasn't one of the most popular from what I saw. Ooh, Dragonite. Dragonite could be a good one. Only problem is he might be slightly similar to Charizard, but yeah, I should get my Magikarp leveled up while I'm doing this. Ooh, it's hot in here. Alakazam could be awesome. I would love Alakazam. Gengar. Gengar would be good. It might be good to have a pure fighting type, like a Hitmonlee. Hitmonlee was pretty popular. He's a humanoid too, which makes things a lot easier. That's my general thoughts. It's not a very good video, I'm well aware. I didn't do a lot in terms of going in depth, but there's not too much I can do. I don't know what I'm going to do next time. Somebody mentioned Star Fox, and looking at it, I don't know. Star Fox is still up in the air for me about whether it needs a new rep. And if it does get one, it seems pretty clear-cut that it's going to be Crystal. So, I don't know how much of a video I can do on it. Zelda? Zelda I'd love to get into. Not going to lie, that would be a crazy in-depth video with all the different games. It would be very long, though. I'm rambling right now, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this short. And, yeah, so I guess I'll see you guys next time. Alright? Alright.